one video straight onto the next. Good morning everybody. I literally just recorded yesterday's video. I haven't been wearing this t-shirt for like the last 48 hours, don't you worry. Although I do have a lot of white t-shirts, so it could be difficult to tell. We are in Luke today and we are finishing off chapter 12 and getting ready for chapter 13, which is really exciting. We've just got a couple of little passages today and I probably can't talk for too long because my camera's about to run out of space, so let's just jump straight into it. From verse 54 of Luke 12 says, he also said to the crowds, "When you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once, a shower is coming, and so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be a scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky, but you do not know how to interpret the present time." So it's a very simple little analogy that Jesus gives the people. He compares their knowledge of the weather with their knowledge of present time. What does he mean by the present time? Well, specifically interpretation of the present time. Well, he's talking about being able to understand what God's doing, what God's plan is, and seeing how God's growing his kingdom. And Jesus compares that with knowing the weather. And so let's look at what he says first with the weather. He says, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once a shower is coming, and so it happens. The reason why a cloud in the west would bring that was because over the Mediterranean, there would be, clouds would be building over the Mediterranean, they'd be blowing over from the west, they would hit the mountains of Palestine, they'd rise up, those would cool, and they'd bring rain. And so that was a fairly uniform thing that the people always knew. If there were clouds coming from the west, those clouds would bring rain. And he talks about, and when you see a south wind blowing, you say there'll be a scorching heat, and it happens. That's because from the south you've got Africa, essentially, so you've got huge great plains of land where the air will just heat up and be really dry, and so you get strong winds blowing up from there, and those will be scorching hot. It makes sense, and it happens. These people perceive that, they understand that, they know that, and Jesus goes, you hypocrites for knowing that. You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? He's saying, look, you can see that, you can see a wind is blowing from this direction, you know what the weather's going to be like, and yet you don't understand that I'm the Son of God, that I've come down to, I'm part of the Holy Trinity, part of God, sort of a third of God. It doesn't quite work like that, but like a third of God come down, stood in front of you, talking to you, and you don't know who I am, you don't acknowledge who I am, and you don't see all of the signs of this book, this scripture that you've been learning your whole life, how all of these things point to me. You don't see that, but yet you see a cloud coming from that direction and you know that it's going to rain. Is Jesus criticizing people's approach to life? It's like, why are you paying so much attention to these things of the world, to understanding that kind of thing, and not actually spending time with scripture, not actually spending time with God, trying to deepen your faith, deepen your understanding of scripture, I was going to say the Bible, but these are the Jewish people, but you know what I mean, their equivalent from the time. Yeah, so it's a simple challenge, but it's one that still sticks to us as well. It's like, how often do we sort of spend time going really deep? I know as a university student, you spend time understanding really unnecessarily complicated niche things, and working really hard on knowing that, but then you don't know basic things about the Bible, you don't know basic things about your own faith. It's like, actually, where are we putting our priorities here? What are we studying and why are we studying it? So passage number 1. Passage number 2 goes from verse 57, and it says, "And why do you not judge yourselves? Why do you not judge for yourselves what is right? As you go with your accuser before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, lest he drag you to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer put you in prison. I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the very last penny." So, this is quite a practical lesson on the surface. Jesus is basically saying, look, if you go with someone to court, just try and settle your differences before it gets there. Try not to make it a big deal, a big argument in the courtroom. because that's quite a dangerous thing to do, because if it doesn't go your way, you can end up in a lot of trouble. You can end up, being given to the judge who gives you to an officer who locks you up, and then you've got to pay tons and tons of money. So Jesus is saying, look, try and settle things out of court whenever you can. So that's what he's saying on a practical level. But my Bible actually offers me an interesting look at this, where it's saying there may be sort of a metaphorical level underlying this as well, where Jesus could be talking about making peace with people on earth before you get put before God. So if we look at the passage like that, you and your accuser are both sort of people on earth who have a difficulty, a conflict. It could be you and a family member, you and someone who was a friend, that kind of thing. And God would be the judge in this situation. And so let's read through it again. And why do you not judge for yourselves what is right? As you go with your accuser before the magistrate, so the magistrate being God, make an effort to settle with him on the way, lest he drag you to the judge. Well, okay, so the judge is God, magistrate, judge. I don't know all the technical terminology, let's say. But essentially, God is the one who is judging. Lest he drag you to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer put you in prison. So, on one level, this could be just very simple practical advice, but given that it comes directly after Jesus addressing people and saying, do you not know how to interpret the present time? And given that this passage literally starts off with, and why do you blah blah blah, like it's an and, so Jesus is directly following on from what you're saying. And because that passage before was so clearly not just about the weather, but was about interpreting God, I'm going to stand by that this second passage talking about the judge is also working on that level as well, working on that metaphorical level. It's sort of a continuation with a slightly different metaphor. So what is that metaphor saying essentially? Well, it's saying if you have a conflict, if you have a problem with someone on earth, with one of your friends, don't just drag it out, don't go to the grave with it. Don't make that thing hang over your whole life. Because if you do, and you get brought before God, brought before the heavens at the final judgment, do you really want to have this person having this issue with you still, or you still got an issue with that person? Do you want there to be any kind of problems in your heart at that point, or do you want to just be clean? Do you want to be able to stand there and say, yeah, I've resolved everything was fine? Chances are you want to resolve everything. And so there's an additional challenge with this has been said before several times, but you don't know when your time is coming. You don't know when you're going to die. Like the parable of the rich fool, God comes and takes his soul before he was expecting, and so he hadn't prepared. He hadn't sort of sold all his grain and lived his life that he'd been planning on living. And so it's the same thing here. It's don't wait to settle your differences. Don't drag it out. Settle them now, because you never know. And you don't want these kind of things hanging over you. You don't want them hanging over you for your earthly life, but you definitely don't want them hanging over you once your earthly life is done. So settle your differences. We looked at divisions yesterday. Those divisions, they may still be there, but you can still be peaceful over those divisions. You can still reach out to people, and you can still make amends for them. Division doesn't necessarily mean conflict, doesn't necessarily mean pain and that kind of thing. You can heal divisions. And so that's where chapter 12 ends. That's what his final lesson is make amends with the people around you. I think that's a pretty good lesson to have. So that is today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you tomorrow. I might be in a different location by then, we shall see. I hope you have a good day. Much love.